Hello, welcome to Gardener's World, and to what is, I think, the most thrilling weekend of the whole year. It's not because there's any particularly special event, but because we get this gift of an hour of extra light with summertime. And as the days get longer, of course, the gardeners are responding by breaking into flower at every turn. Here in the copse, the primroses, like little stars, they're shining and growing in amongst the increasing green. And it's this that makes this such a magical time of year. On tonight's programme, Frances Tophill continues her Caribbean experience by visiting 2 gardens in Barbados packed with colour. And Nick Bailey delves into the fascinating world of lichen. Come on in, here. It is time to start planting the new area that is replacing where the boxballs were and the hedged borders here, which have box hedges all the way around. And I want to enclose this area, but rather than hedge it, I'm going to continue the pleach lines. Pleaching is a method of training trees so that the branches grow sideways, just in 2 dimensions, to form a natural structure or hedge raised up above the ground. To do this, most of the lateral branches are removed so that you have a clean trunk. And there are a number of trees you can use, including hornbeam, apple or pear, but lime is the most common. I want to continue the line of existing limes into this new area, so I'm marking out the plot. Now, when you're planting any tree, whether it's bare root or in a container, what you're looking to dig is a fairly shallow but wide hole. It's a mistake to enrich the soil too much, because ultimately you want your tree to grow out into whatever is there. And if you make a planting pocket full of the best compost, the roots will just stay in that planting pocket. Now, what I have here is Tilia cordata, small leaf lime. And I'm planting bare root limes. And the advantage of bare root is that you have a wider choice and they're cheaper. But we're getting right to the end of the bare root season. In fact, if you want to buy bare root trees, do so this weekend. Okay, I need a structure to support the pleaching. I've got these chestnut stakes, and chestnut is perfect for any tree support or stake that's going to be in the ground for a long time because it rots very, very slowly. The reason why you plant bare root plants between October and March is because the tree is dormant and it's not demanding anything of the roots. So when you plant it out, the roots can start to grow before you get bud break, and that will ask the roots to do a lot of work. Containerized plants you can plant at any time of year. Right. Now, this is the critical thing, because the roots drying out is what we're worried about. Once you've got 2 trees in the ground, you can start pleaching. And remember that pleaching is simply a means of connecting trees either into lines of branches, or you can have it as a hedge up above ground. And it's a brilliant way of doing 2 things. 1, of getting trees into a small space, and 2, of creating structure. But this, however modestly you do it, is part of a long and, I think, glorious tradition of European gardening. Now, let's go from glorious European gardening to glorious Caribbean gardening, because Frances Tophill spent her winter volunteering in the Botanic Gardens in Barbados. And this week, we join her as she's out and about looking at local gardens.
Barbados, a beautiful Caribbean island. With the perfect climate for wonderful tropical plants, some breathtaking gardens, and some very passionate gardeners. I've been on Barbados for a few weeks now, and I'm really getting to know and love this beautiful place. While I was out exploring the island, I came across this verge of amazing blue flowers, which led on to a colourful hedge. So I followed the trail, and it brought me to an incredible-looking garden. I couldn't resist, so I knocked on the door, and Merle, the owner, has invited me back to have a look around. The garden.
Welcome to Barbados.
Thank you. What an amazing garden. Will you show me it?
Yes.
So how long have you been here?
I was living here for over 40 years now.
40 years?
Yes.
So are there any favourite plants that you have here?
The Joseph Court, not really a favourite, but I love the colour.
Got some amazing varieties of them. In the UK, they would grow as bedding and they would die at the end of the year.
What you do is catching flowers.
Okay.
Cut the flowers off.
And then they keep living?
Yes, they live longer.
And when it snows, what do you do? Merle is a passionate plantswoman, and she's filled her garden with plants that she's grown herself.
Oh my! I have some more here as well.
It just goes on.
I see the hibiscus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that hibiscus there is white on mornings, and then as the day get older, turn to pink and then turn to red.
So in the morning it's white.
White.
And when is it red in the evening?
Yes.
On one day?
Yes, one day.
What an amazing plant.
So right here now, I hatch my plants in here. This sun I have in this pot.
Just sand?
Sand, yes.
In this old bath?
Yes. So I hatch here. You see I have a root.
That's amazing. So you're taking cuttings basically and you call that hatching?
Yes, yes.
I like that.
Propagating.
Propagating,
so,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. I like
so
hatching better. Hatching is good.
Right. So you have the root here.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is this here, no, is to plant in the ground. Sand is building sand.
That's amazing.
And once the sand is wet, it will catch quick. It won't take too long to catch, probably a week or so.
So that there has been growing just for 1 week and it's got a root that size?
Yes, yes.
That's amazing. And is that a song of India?
Yes. Yes, so we have some more plants along here.
So many plants. Yeah. Oh, I love the poinsettia.
Poinsettia.
Is that grown for Christmas here as well?
Yes, it's grown for Christmas, yeah.
See, we have them in England.
These
in little, they're this big.
I know
and
that
then
big.
we throw them away. They never get this big. Like the poinsettia, the rest of Merle's garden is full of tropical plants that most of us in the UK only ever see in florists or grow indoors. During my time on Barbados, I've got a real sense that, like Merle, the Barbadians absolutely love their plants and their gardens. This island is full of surprises. In the urban sprawl of Bridgetown is a suburb that was once fields of sugarcane. Barbados is famous for its legends of cricket and its prowess on the world athletic stage. But here, on this suburban estate, there's another kind of world champion, and the clue is in the street name. Michael Waite grows thousands of orchids in his small back garden. And he has travelled the world showing them. So what is it about orchids that you love? Why orchids?
The flowering aspect, the variation of colour, sizes, it's beautiful. And not only that, they distress you. These are referred to as semi-terete vandas. And basically, semi means smaller. As you can see, the leaves are a little closed in. And as we would say in the orchid world, the narrower the leaf, the more sun it can take.
So these ones are outside for that reason?
These are outside orchids.
And how many do you have?
Over 2,000.
Over 2,000?
Over 2,000.
Wow. That's a real collection. Michael grows plenty of beautiful orchids that flourish in the blazing tropical sun. But some do need a little protection. They're crammed in, aren't they? You have a lot.
As you can see, the shade cloth to reduce the amount of light coming into the plant house.
And there's such a variety of different coloured flowers in here, aren't there? And these ones, I love these with the cupped petals.
That's a nice colour. I love it also.
Do you think it would be possible for UK growers to grow these?
Yes, they can be grown, but under special conditions. Huh? So if it's grown in a greenhouse and you have controlled temperatures in there, heaters, that you can control the temperature. You will also notice that the roots, it's not grown in any sort of medium. No mold, no potting mix, nothing. It's just bare roots. So you need to spray your plants at least twice a day. And a quick way of knowing when you have thoroughly soaked your plant, this grey, silvery colour of the root should turn green. You would find that you have more colour more often in your greenhouse, and you will get to love.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Brilliant.
There is no plant more exotic than an orchid. And it's lovely to see them growing in that environment. However, we have some compensations. At this time of year, our daffodils and primulas and fritillaries and hyacinths are pretty good. It's time to plant tomatoes. Tomatoes are the most popular vegetable, albeit the fact they're a berry, that we grow. And most people grow them outside. I don't here at Longmeadow because we get terrible blight. But if you're growing them outside, certainly now is the time to sow them. I've got some that I've sowed earlier. These are now ready for pricking out. But that's a pretty good example of how thick you need to sow them. Certainly no thicker than that. You can use any compost and tomatoes will germinate, but for perfection, get seed compost. Seed compost just has less nutrients and is slightly finer and rather easier, especially for small seeds to grow in. But it's not something to get hung up about. A peat-free general purpose compost will do the job perfectly well. Right. So you just choose your seeds, and I'm going to grow Gardener's Delight and sprinkle them thinly on the surface. Now, quite tricky to sow these individually as opposed to clumps, but I don't think that matters terribly because you can thin them out when they're growing. And then I just press them in very lightly so they're making good contact with the surface, and then cover them over. You can cover them with grit, you can cover them with vermiculite, or easiest of all is just to sieve a little bit of potting compost over the top. And finally, a label. And Gardener's Delight is a good doer because it's delicious, they make a lovely sauce, they're good roasted, and however you eat them, they explode with flavour. They're a really good, tasty tomato. Excuse me, Nige. Now, having sown them, to get them to germinate, they will need some heat. A windowsill above a radiator is fine, a porch, or if you've got a greenhouse with a heated mat, that is ideal. And then they will germinate in about 10 days to 2 weeks' time. Now, I guess most of you are aware by now that this is our Jubilee year. And one of the ways that we're celebrating those 50 years of Gardener's World is for each of us presenters to make the case for the one plant that we think has had the most impact. Not necessarily our favourite, but the one that we feel has changed and affected the way that we've all gardened across the 50 years. And now, this week, it's the turn of Rachel de Tame to make her case.
I've chosen Aquilegia vulgaris. It's also known as the columbine or granny's bonnet. It's a very popular perennial, and when it first emerges in spring, you get this beautiful, fresh, rather sort of frothy foliage at the base. It sends up long stems with lovely spurred flowers in soft pastel shades of pink and mauve with white and then darker purples as well. And they're rather promiscuous, so you never know quite what colour you're going to get when they self-seed. Now, I've chosen it because it represents a whole palette of plants that love shady conditions. And I think in the last 50 years, we've really come on in terms of putting the right plant in the right place. So that's why I've chosen as my Golden Jubilee plant the Aquilegia vulgaris, because I think it says that in a nutshell.
Rachel has chosen a plant that thrives specifically in shady areas. And today I'm planting a clematis that also loves these shady conditions. I want to start planting up this wall. Every wall has pros and cons. This wall, which is east-facing, does get some sun, but it's cold. So these clematis have adapted to that. They're Clematis alpina. The first is one called Lemon Beauty. It will flower from April time to about the beginning of May. It's a spring flower, and therefore it's Group 1 clematis, which means that it flowers on last year's growth. So it should only be pruned very lightly, if at all, and if you're going to do that, you prune it in spring. When you're growing any climber up a wall, get it well away from it, and then you can angle it back in. That does two things. It allows a decent root spread and also ensures that there's some moisture. Clematis hate dry roots, so pull it away from the wall. And the other one I'm going to plant is called White Columbine. This is also an alpina, lovely white flowers. And I'm going to pull this over onto this end, about the same distance, and then later on I'm going to plant a rose in the middle, a rose that will enjoy a shady wall, but that's for another day. Now, the planting of any clematis is actually quite specific, because what we want is a deep hole. In essence, what I'm doing is digging out a sump, and I'm going to backfill it with lots of compost. And that's not so much as a feed, but as a kind of reservoir to hold moisture. So these deep roots can get down, and if it's very dry, they will be able to find some moisture. I'm going to add some mycorrhizae, which is a fungus that helps make a connection between the roots of the plant and nutrients and moisture in the soil. And this can be planted fairly deep. Now simply backfill around it, like that. Firm it in gently, but this is not going to rock about very much. It'll need a cane taking it to the wall, and then obviously a support once it's on the wall. Clematis are not ideal on wires because they tend to sort of flop over it. So either a trellis on the wall or some netting of some kind probably will work better. But in the end, like everything else, it's what's convenient and what you've got. Right, let's get the other one. These clematis should grow strongly this year, and on that growth will develop flowers for next spring. And very quickly, in a year or two, they will cover this part of the wall. Now, underneath them, which is there already, are some lichen. A lot of people are slightly confused whether they're a plant, whether they're an organism, whether they're beneficial or actively harmful. Well, Nick Bailey has been on the trail of the joys of lichen.
Look out of your window and they're absolutely everywhere. But very few people know much about the secret world of lichen. You'll find them in graveyards, in gardens, growing on old trees. And often people try and get rid of them or scrub them away. Some people celebrate them. What I'm here to investigate is, are they truly a friend or a foe to gardeners?
A lichen is two organisms functioning as a single unit. It's a symbiotic partnership between a fungus and an alga. They cover 6% of the Earth's surface and can grow in the most extreme environments where few other living things can survive. Mark Powell is a lichenologist and has been studying and identifying Britain's native lichens for more than 10 years.
Most of us have got lichens in one form or another in our gardens. How many lichens are there globally? How many different species?
I think there's something like 30,000 different lichens in the world.
Wow.
In Britain, the latest count is something approaching 2,000 lichens.
People often cite lichen growing on benches or on stonework as a sign of clean air, but that's not strictly true, is it?
Well, yes and no. If you go to the west of Scotland, there will be a lot of spectacular bushy lichens. This area, we're sitting in the South Midlands. This area, from the Industrial Revolution onwards, was heavily affected by sulphur dioxide pollution. This bench would be covered in one particular lichen that actually thrived in the high sulphur dioxide levels.
Right.
That situation is now changing because the levels of sulphur dioxide have gone down. We're now in a new pollution regime with lots of nitrogen.
Wow.
And that's why a lot of the twigs these days are covered in these spectacular yellow lichens, because they favour a lot of nutrient enrichment.
So lichens are an indicator of a certain type of air quality, so they can say, OK, this is really pure clean air, or they can say this is really nitrogenous air, or this has got another toxin, and the species of lichen will indicate that air type.
They're very sensitive indicators, yes.
I mean, I think they're beautiful things, but are they a genuine benefit to us?
They're a benefit to the environment. If this bench happened to just be a varnish bench with no lichens on them, there would be less biodiversity. It's not only the lichens themselves, but if you started stripping these lichens off, there would be all sorts of invertebrates underneath. They're like a little miniature forest.
And so the birds are literally going in the depths of winter when there's nothing else to eat, and they can find those mites and grubs.
Yes, they
and
can.
things.
They sometimes strip off the lobes to get at the various different invertebrates that specialise in living underneath the canopy.
With an array of antique stone and mature trees, a graveyard is one of the best places to find lichen and answer a common gardening question.
Gardeners tend to think that lichens are killing off a plant when they've got these sort of clusters across the surface, but that's not the case, is it?
No, I get asked this so many times. People have a shrub that looks sickly in their garden and it's covered in lichens, and they think it's the lichens that is killing the shrub off. What's actually happening is the shrub is becoming sickly for another reason, and the extra light coming in, because there aren't so many leaves on this side, is allowing the lichens to thrive.
So it's in no way a parasite, it's not damaging the plant?
No, there's no actual hyphae that are going into the bark.
And this yellow lichen, this is probably the one I've seen most commonly in gardens, and is it particularly common in the UK?
It is very common. I guarantee any gardener in the country will have this in their garden. It's called Xanthoria parietina. The yellow colour there you can see is a pigment on the surface of the lichen. That's been shown to have active chemicals against leukemia cells.
Wow, so it's actually potentially a seriously useful medicine as well?
Yes, yeah, that's being investigated actively at the moment, yes. These are particularly interesting because here we've got a sandstone gravestone and we've got a limestone gravestone. It's exciting for a lichenologist because the communities are completely different. It's like being able to step from a acid moorland straight onto a chalk downland in one step. There's not one lichen growing on that stone that grows on this stone and vice versa.
But looking at the two stones, the two sort of yellowy orangey forms look very, very similar to me.
They look a similar colour, but they are different species, and I can prove they are. We perform what we call spot tests. So if I go and put a spot of chemical on this orange lichen here, you'll see there's a colour change. You see it's a reddish-purple colour.
Yeah, it's a really strong scarlet.
Whereas if I try it on this lichen over here, which looks superficially similar, you see there's perhaps a slight darkening, but certainly not that reaction.
I think it's fascinating that these two stones right beside each other represent two totally different ecosystems. I've been truly amazed by the qualities of lichen. They're incredibly diverse. They grow in all sorts of environments and they can adapt to all sorts of situations.
And by increasing biodiversity and providing food for birds and insects, these fascinating but often overlooked organisms can be a welcome addition to any garden.
Well, I do so agree with Nick. I think lichen is wonderful. You know, even little splodges improve the character and texture, and you can encourage it into the garden along with moss. This brick wall here, I painted with yogurt. And it looked a bit odd at first, but moss and lichen have grown much more quickly as a result. Well, whatever your views on lichen, it's time to get stuck in with those jobs for the weekend. Because buddleia flower on new shoots, it's time to cut all last year's growth right back to a bud just above ground level. If they're in open space, this can be right down to the ground. But in a border, it's a good idea to leave a foot or so of growth. As soon as your ground is dry enough to rake fine, sow some parsnips. Make a shallow drill about a foot apart and sow the flat seeds as thinly as you can. Because they're very slow to germinate, it's a good idea to add some radish seed to the same drill. These will germinate and grow quickly and can be harvested before they're competing with the parsnips for light or nutrition. If you bubble wrapped your greenhouse or cold frames over winter, now's the time to remove it, because you want as much light as possible to reach growing seedlings. And if you didn't use bubble wrap, give the glass a really good clean to let that light in. I have to say that I've been really enjoying the weather over the last few days, but let's see if us gardeners are all going to have good weather this weekend.